I'd been working at La Lumiere for nearly 2 years, enough time to learn every table's quirks, every regular's favorite dish, and most importantly, how to smile through even the nastiest insult without spilling a single drop of sauce. Tonight was a slow Tuesday. Most of our best tables had left, and the maître d'hôtel had quietly given me the upstairs private room. It was supposed to be a treat, less foot traffic, more tips, but I could feel that uneasy prickle in my spine, the one that means trouble's on the way. He swept in just before 8 sharp, 8:30, no later. I saw him cross the parquet floor first. Broad shoulders, cufflinks glinting under the low chandeliers, that expensive cologne wafting like a warning. I straightened my spine, tucked a strand of auburn hair behind my ear, and plastered on my professional smile. "Good evening, sir," I said, voice calm. "Table for one?" He nodded curtly, barely meeting my eyes. His tie was the exact shade of midnight blue that always looks deliberate, expensive, and just a bit cruel. "Yes," he said, voice low and clipped. "And I'll need water, sparkling, not that flat nonsense." He shifted his phone in his hand, eyes flicking over the menus pinned on the wall. "What's your lobster risotto like?" I'd learned early on that describing dishes to a shark like him required precision. If I said decadent, he'd call me a sycophant. If I said rich, he'd mutter too fattening. So I settled on the facts. Our lobster risotto features Maine lobster tail, slow-cooked arborio rice in a saffron broth, finished with a touch of aged Parmesan. It's one of our most popular dishes. He said nothing. I detected the faintest twitch at the corner of his lip, like he was deciding whether I was worthy of his time. Finally he sighed and said, "Fine, do that, but make it quick. I have a meeting at 9. I jotted down his order, turned on my heel, and glided away. I could hear him muttering under his breath as I passed. "Meeting? At this pace, I'll never make it." Typical CEO of some Fortune 500 company complaining about a 2-minute wait. I shook my head and set the plate to cooking. Back at the stove, I caught sight of him through the pass window, the way he lounged in his chair, ankle over knee, checking emails on his phone, as if the world would end if he wasn't immediately updated on every penny his empire made. I reminded myself he tipped decently when pleased, but scornfully, and scorn is a headwind you learn to run through early in this job. When I carried the lobster risotto to him, it was piping hot, just as the head chef intended. He glanced up, fork poised, as if inspecting a rare gem. Then he stabbed a corner of the rice, lifted it to his mouth, chewed once, and said, "Too dry." My pulse jerked. Too dry. Not undercooked, not too salty, too dry. I swallowed. "I'm so sorry, sir. Would you like me to have the chef add more broth?" He huffed. "Do whatever it takes, but don't make me wait 10 minutes. I'm not here to dine. I'm here because my assistant misread the calendar." His tone was full-on disdain blast. I'd rather just pay and leave. Tell the chef not to bother. I glanced at the dish. The vibrant lobster tail sat nestled atop the rice, bright as a piece of coral. "I'll personally ensure it's to your liking," I said, voice calm but firm. "Please allow me 2 minutes." He waved a dismissive hand, as if my words were an inconvenience. "Fine, but hurry." I carried the plate back, gave the kitchen a curt nod, and within moments, carefully spooning extra saffron broth around the edges, I had a rebuilt risotto that glowed. I returned to his table, placed it before him, and stepped back, arms at my sides. "Here you are, sir, a little more broth, as requested." He raised his fork again, speared a bite, and paused. He lifted his eyes to mine, just the slightest fraction, and nodded once. "Better," he said, and dove back into his meal. I exhaled quietly and stepped away, letting him eat in peace. Normally I'd breathe easier once the first dish was accepted, but something about him kept me alert, as if the slightest slip would unleash a storm. Halfway through the new risotto, he looked up again, face serious. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, "I don't usually tip at restaurants. I pay for the service with the bill, not a percentage. I expect perfection, no fluffs, no mistakes. If you deliver that, maybe I'll give you something extra." I held his gaze steadily, though my heart pulsed against my ribs. "Understood, sir," I replied. "I'll do my best." He inclined his head. "Good. Now bring me a glass of your best red, and not that Merlot nonsense. I want a Bordeaux that'll wake me up." I nodded and left, rising up on the balls of my feet to catch the sommelier's eye. A few minutes later, I returned with a crystal glass half filled with a deep garnet red wine. He sniffed, swirled, sipped, and set the glass down. "Decent," he said. Didn't die in my mouth, that's all I need. When the bill arrived, he tossed down a crisp bill enough to cover the meal with room for a good tip and stood up. He put on his coat with the precision of someone accustomed to having assistants do it for him. I leaned forward with the check folder. His attention flicked to me for a fraction of a second, then back to the doorframe. He paused there, then turned, brows knitting. One more thing, my breath caught. I stayed still. Professional. Yes, sir? He studied me for a moment, as if weighing whether the words were worth the breath. Then he said, "What's your name?" The question knocked me off balance, more than all his insults combined. I almost said, "Waitress," but instead managed, "Julia, sir. Julia Marquez." His brows rose. "Julia, you have good service. I haven't had you before." He shifted his gaze to my name tag, then back to me. "How come?" I lifted my chin. "I usually serve our rooftop lounge, but tonight I was covering upstairs." He frowned, perplexed. "Rooftop lounge. You're the same," he gestured vaguely. "Level of service as out there." I forced a smile, heart still pounding from the unexpected attention. "Yes, sir. Our service model is consistent throughout. Different atmosphere, same standards." He looked at me, folding his arms. Suddenly, I felt the charge of something electric, like a current gathering before a bolt of lightning. His gaze was less dismissive, almost curious. For a moment, I thought I detected respect flicker in his eyes. Then he shook his head. "No, that's not it." He turned, as if ready to leave, then paused. "You're not like the others." My pulse hammered. "Excuse me?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Your posture, the way you talk back, softly but firmly. Most servers would swallow insults all night and never push back. You do it politely, but you still do it." I cleared my throat, searching for the right words. "I believe in mutual respect, sir. We're all human, after all." He stared at me, jaw tightening. Then he laughed, a brief, surprised bark. Not mocking, but genuine. "You're bold." He took a breath, glanced down at the table. "You're lucky I have another meeting. I could keep watching you." I blinked. "Thank you." He eyed the empty wine glass, one brow arching. "Refill this," he said, gesturing. And then he added, voice dropping low, "Tell me something." My heart thudded. I nodded and hurried off. When I brought the new pour, he inhaled the aroma deeply, closing his eyes. "That's better," he murmured. He set the glass down gently. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Tell me why you're not working in finance, or law, or corporate ladder climbing. Anything besides waiting tables." The question hung in the air like a dare. I met his gaze evenly. "Because I'm studying creative writing," I replied quietly. "I want to be a novelist." His eyes flicked to the notebook bulging in my apron pocket, something I'd hoped he hadn't noticed. He clicked his tongue. "A writer? That's for dreamers." I swallowed, "Maybe. But dreams are better than regrets." For the first time, he didn't have a ready comeback. He stared at me, mouth open slightly, as if tasting the words. The sound of the restaurant around us faded. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, 2 fingers tapping his glass. "That's a strange answer." I tilted my head, felt a tendril of nervous excitement coil in my chest. Strange isn't always bad. He studied me again, as if seeing me fully for the first time. The hard lines of his face softened, just a fraction. Then he shook his head, straightened up, and said, "I'll tell you something." He paused, measuring me. "Most people here, they pretend you're invisible. I've never heard anyone argue with me. You've got guts." He stood, slipping a card onto the table. "If you ever want to talk books, call me." He tapped it. "Ethan Drake." Then he turned and strode toward the exit, leaving me blinking after him. I picked up the card. The gold lettering caught the chandelier light. My name, Julia, and then in smaller font, Ethan Drake, CEO, Drake Industries. Read, write, live. I sank onto the chair he'd just vacated, heart pounding so hard I was sure it echoed through the room. A dozen questions burned in my mind. Who was he, really? What did he want with a waitress? Why did he give me his card? And what would happen if I called? I slipped the card into my notebook pocket and rose. Footsteps approached, my shift manager, hustling toward me. I tucked a strand of hair back defiantly, grinned, and said, "He left his card." Her eyes widened. "You mean Ethan Drake?" I nodded, pulse still thrumming. "Yeah. And I think tonight, I'm the one he'll never forget. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one sentence to change everything. And the next chapter? Well, that's a story for another night." I slipped the card into my apron pocket and watched Ethan Drake's retreating back, trying to decide whether I'd dreamed the whole thing. The restaurant's buzz returned in a rush, plates clinking, muffled laughter, the sommelier discussing vintages, and I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes curious about the exchange. But I kept my head high, straightened my apron, and carried on with my shift, as though handing him another glass of wine was the most natural thing in the world. That night, after closing duties and the final sweep of crumbs from the floor, I tucked the Drake Industries card into my journal framed by half-scribbled story ideas. The city lights outside my apartment window danced in time with my racing thoughts. Why had he given me his number? A dare? A genuine intrigue? My inner novelist buzzed conflict, tension, character arcs. But real life, of course, wasn't my fiction, at least, not yet. Sleep came in fitful bursts. I dreamed of Ethan seated at a grand mahogany desk, shelves of law books behind him, eyes serious as he recited lines from my unpublished manuscript. I woke twice to scribble down fragments in the dark, but when morning light crept in, I realized the notebook was blank. My plans of calling him immediately shuddered under a wave of self-doubt. What would I even say? 2 days passed. I served overpriced risottos to hedge fund managers and deflected complaints about minor imperfections with a practiced smile. I caught myself reaching for Ethan's card more times than I'd care to admit. But every time my fingers brushed the gold lettering, I hesitated, afraid that making the call would break some unwritten rule of life and service. Until Thursday afternoon, when the kitchen erupted into chaos. A dinner party of 20 arrived unexpectedly. CEO meet and greet, price no object, demanding personalities from across tech and finance. Reservations overlapped. Oysters flew. One guest sneered because his martini wasn't chilled enough. Another tipped a pitiful 75 cents. My manager barked orders, pans crashed in the kitchen, and for a moment I thought I might crack. That's when the hostess, a sharp-jawed woman with a red power suit, cornered me. "You're Julia, right? The one who stood up to Drake." Her voice was low but urgent. "You, upstairs kitchen, get down here now. I need you on table 12. My heart lurched. How did she know my name? "Of course," I said, smoothing my apron and offering a calm smile I didn't feel. As I passed the pass window, I caught the chef's eye. He shook his head. "She's on the clock," he mouthed. I squared my shoulders and followed the hostess to the VIP section. Table 12 was framed by velvet drapes, a semi-private enclave of swirling polos and pinstriped suits. The hostess gestured to an empty chair. "Sit," she commanded, then surveyed the group. "You have 2 minutes to sell the best appetizer our chef can produce. And yes, I know you're a waitress, but I've seen you negotiate under pressure." She handed me a wine list. "You're in sales now. Make it count." My throat went dry. I'd barely served those men, let alone pitched to them. But I recalled Ethan's words. Guts. I inhaled. "Gentlemen," I began, voice clear. "Tonight our chef has crafted a seared scallop crowned with pea puree, accented by citrus oil and microgreens, picked at dawn." I paused, letting the words settle. "It's light, elegant, and designed to prepare your palate for the richness ahead." I made eye contact with each of them, measured, confident. They exchanged glances. The tallest man, whose tie could fund half my rent, raised an eyebrow. "And why should we trust this?" He gestured at me. "Presentation over tradition." I smiled, soft but firm, because good dining is as much about story as flavor. It's not just scallop on a plate. It's the story of fishermen at sunrise, of fresh peas harvested before dawn, of an idea born in our chef's notebook. And you're not just eating, you're experiencing. The room held its breath. The hostess leaned forward, eyes glittering. "That's why I chose you." She tapped her phone. Orders were placed. Moments later, steaming plates arrived and were devoured with appreciative murmurs. Table 12 erupted in applause. The tallest man handed me an envelope thick with crisp bills, an unthinkable tip. I accepted it, stunned, but my eyes searched the doorway. Ethan. He stood there, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I met his gaze and mouthed one word. "Why?" He melted into the room, weaving between chairs until he stood beside me. "You handled that brilliantly," he said quietly, voice low enough that only I heard. "I had to see if you'd rise to the real challenge." He nodded to the departing party. "Sales, presentation, pressure. That's more than any resume can teach you." I blinked, heart pounding. "You orchestrated this?" He shrugged as if it were normal. "I know people who know people. I wanted to see if you were as exceptional as you seemed." I found myself bristling, both offended and exhilarated. "Exceptional?" I echoed. "Is that what I mean to you?" He tipped his head. "I don't know what you mean to me yet, but I want to find out. When you're not waiting tables, when you're writing, when you're being Julia, not just the server who stood up to a billionaire, what will you do?" I swallowed. The card in my pocket suddenly felt very heavy. "Write stories," I said. "Mostly fiction now, but I want something real, something that matters." His smile deepened, genuine this time. "Call me," he said, nodding to the card. "I want to help with that, not as your boss, as someone who believes in the story." I exhaled, reality settling around me like a soft blanket. "I'll call you," I promised. Then I returned to the kitchen, left that envelope on the manager's desk, and closed my shift with a grin as wide as the city skyline. 2 weeks later, I sat at a small cafe table across from Ethan. The clink of cups and hum of conversation felt distant, as though I'd slipped into a private world. He leaned over a sheaf of my handwritten pages, my first draft of a short story about a waitress and a mysterious billionaire. He read out lines, pausing to underline passages. "You have a gift," he said, voice quiet but earnest. "Your descriptions breathe, your dialogue crackles. I want to introduce you to a publisher friend." He tapped his phone. "I've arranged a meeting next week." My chest tightened. The corners of my mouth threatened to twitch upward. "Why are you doing this?" He met my gaze, serious. "Partly because I'm invested in your success, mostly because you reminded me that life's too short to ignore potential." He slid my pages back across the table. "This is your dream. Go for it." I looked down at my messy handwriting and felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." He leaned back, studying me. "This is bigger than dinner service," he said. "It's about believing in yourself. You did that the moment you served me that night." I laughed softly, heart full, "And now I serve you words." He smiled. "Exactly." A month later, I held the contract from Silverline Press, my name in type, the promise of a first printing. I called Ethan at his office, voice shaking. "They want to publish me." He chuckled, low and delighted. I knew they would. When I asked how he'd pulled the strings, he only said, "I told them about the waitress who dared to challenge a billionaire. They wanted that story." I paused. "So what's our next story?" His laughter came over the line. "That's for us to find out." Julia Marquez, author and occasional waitress, what's next on your menu? I closed my eyes and let the moment sink in. "Everything," I said. "Everything's next."